At my 32nd birthday dinner, my mother smiled across the table as if she were about to make a heartfelt toast. Instead, she leaned toward my father and whispered just loud enough for me to catch 5 words that changed everything. "Tell Darius to change the locks." I kept my smile exactly where it was. No one at the table realized I'd heard her. My brother casually checked his phone, pushed back his chair, and stood. "Sorry," he said with an easy grin. "A client just called. I'll be right back." His wife, Vanessa, squeezed his hand beneath the table. "Don't be long." He nodded once before disappearing through the front doors of one of Atlanta's most expensive restaurants. Everyone else continued pretending nothing unusual had happened. I watched the crystal chandelier reflect off my untouched glass of sparkling water, exactly as I'd expected. They thought Darius was driving across town to throw my belongings into the hallway, change the locks, and hand my apartment over to himself. On my birthday, my own family believed I would finish dinner with nowhere to sleep. They believed I was still the same struggling 22-year-old woman they'd spent years manipulating. What none of them knew was that I hadn't rented that apartment in years, and the front door Darius was about to attack didn't belong to me anymore. An hour later, the restaurant doors swung open so hard they slammed against the wall. Darius stumbled inside. His expensive blazer was gone. His dress shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely keep his phone from slipping onto the floor. Every conversation in the dining room stopped. He looked straight at our table, then at our mother. His lips trembled. "Mom!" His voice cracked so badly several nearby diners turned to stare. "There are armed federal guards outside her door." The color drained from Denise Brooks' face. "What?" They pointed rifles at me. He swallowed hard. They thought I was trying to breach a protected residence. The silence around our table became unbearable. My father stared at him. Vanessa looked as though she couldn't breathe. I simply folded my napkin onto the table, because Darius still didn't know the worst part. Those federal officers hadn't been protecting my apartment. They had been protecting the new occupants. And my brother had just tried to force his way into one of the most heavily secured residences in downtown Atlanta. All because my family believed they could steal from the daughter they had spent years treating like their personal ATM. Before I tell you how my own mother orchestrated the biggest mistake of her life, let me take you back to where this all began. Oh, my name is Naomi Brooks. I'm 32 years old, and for nearly a decade, I built a real estate investment empire so quietly that even the people who raised me never realized they had already become the poorest people in the room. People assume wealthy families look different from everyone else. They imagine sprawling estates, flawless holiday photos, and parents who teach their children the value of hard work. My family looked exactly like that from the outside. Inside, we were something else entirely. I was born into a middle-class black family in Southwest Atlanta. Nothing extraordinary. My father, Harold Brooks, spent most of his career working in commercial insurance. He wasn't a powerful man. He simply knew how to stay quiet. My mother, Denise Brooks, was the opposite. She believed appearances were worth more than honesty. Every outfit had to impress. Every dinner had to look expensive. Every conversation had to end with everyone believing our family was doing better than it actually was. Reality was never her priority. Image was. Growing up, there were only 2 children in our house, my older brother, Darius, and me. From the day we were born, our roles had already been assigned. Darius was the future. I was the insurance policy. Whenever he failed, someone else was expected to fix it, usually me. If he forgot his homework, I should have reminded him. If he lost money, I should have helped. If he broke something, I should have understood how stressed he was. My mother had a favorite sentence. "Your brother carries the family name." As if mine somehow didn't count. When Darius barely graduated high school, she called him misunderstood. When I graduated near the top of my class, she told people I had simply been lucky. Luck. That word followed me for years. Apparently, it was luck that earned scholarships. Luck that landed internships. Luck that kept me awake until 2 a.m. studying while everyone else slept. Nothing I accomplished ever belonged to me. According to my parents, everything good in my life somehow traced back to their sacrifices. Everything bad in Darius's life was someone else's fault. He bounced between business ideas every few months: a sneaker boutique, a rideshare company, a cryptocurrency startup, an online coaching business. Each one ended exactly the same way: big promises, bigger debt, then another excuse. Mom always defended him. He just hasn't found the right opportunity. I lost count of how many times I heard that sentence. Eventually, I stopped correcting her, because every time I questioned Darius, I became the problem. Family gatherings followed the exact same script every year. Someone would ask me how work was going. Before I could answer, my mother would interrupt, "Naomi has one of those office jobs." Then she'd turn toward Darius. "But your brother is building something." Building what? Nobody ever asked. They simply nodded as though he were the next great entrepreneur waiting for his breakthrough. Meanwhile, I quietly climbed the corporate ladder, not because anyone helped me, but because failure wasn't an option. After college, I accepted an analyst position at a boutique investment firm, specializing in distressed commercial properties. The hours were brutal: 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. Most people lasted less than a year. I stayed. I learned how markets really worked, how abandoned buildings became billion-dollar opportunities, and how patient investors made fortunes while everyone else chased headlines. Every promotion brought another lesson, another relationship, another door. Within 6 years, I wasn't just analyzing acquisitions. I was negotiating them. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. A retiring partner wanted to sell his ownership stake. Nobody thought I could afford it. They were right. At least not alone. So I assembled a group of investors I'd spent years quietly earning the trust of. Doctors, attorneys, small business owners, people who valued competence over ego. Together, we acquired the firm. A year later, they voted me managing partner. Eventually, chairwoman. My parents never knew. Whenever my mother asked what I did for a living, I answered honestly, "I work in real estate investments." She never listened long enough to hear the rest. In her mind, an unmarried woman with a quiet personality couldn't possibly be running anything important. That assumption became my greatest advantage. While Darius chased attention, I chased assets. While he leased luxury cars, I bought parking garages. While he posted motivational quotes online, I negotiated multi-million-dollar property acquisitions before breakfast. Money never impressed me. Control did. Owning the building instead of renting the office. Owning the land instead of paying someone else's mortgage. Owning the future instead of performing success for social media. That's how I built my company, one property at a time, one decision at a time. Completely invisible to the people who believed they knew me best. Ironically, the only thing my family thought they understood was where I lived. 5 years earlier, I'd moved into an upscale high-rise in downtown Atlanta. Every holiday dinner, my mother made the same comment: "It must be exhausting paying that kind of rent." I never corrected her. She assumed I was another tenant. She never once wondered why the building manager greeted me by my first name, or why contractors always asked for my approval before beginning renovations, or why residents frequently stopped to thank me in the lobby. People only notice what they expect to see. She expected me to struggle, so that's exactly what she saw. 3 years before my 32nd birthday, my investment firm quietly acquired the entire building through a holding company. Not just my penthouse, every residential unit, every retail space, every elevator, every parking level, every square foot. I became both landlord and owner. The purchase never made local news. That was intentional. The less attention we attracted, the easier future acquisitions became. Only 4 executives inside my company knew the full ownership structure. Not even my extended family had the slightest idea. Looking back, keeping that secret became the smartest business decision I ever made, because it allowed my own family to believe something that would ultimately destroy them. They believed they still had the power to take my home away. And by the time they realized they were wrong, it was already far too late. My 32nd birthday was supposed to be simple. No surprise party, no speeches, no giant celebration, just dinner. That alone should have made me suspicious. My mother had never cared much about my birthdays. Growing up, they were usually an afterthought. When I turned 13, she canceled my birthday dinner because Darius had lost a basketball tournament and needed the family's support. At 17, my birthday money disappeared because my brother needed new tires. At 24, she forgot the day completely until Facebook reminded her. Then she called and said, "You know I love you. I've just been so busy helping your brother." Everything somehow circled back to Darius. Always. So when my mother personally called me 2 weeks before my birthday, asking where I'd like to celebrate, I immediately knew something was wrong. "Pick somewhere nice," Denise said cheerfully over the phone. "You deserve it." Those 4 words sounded so unnatural coming from her that I almost laughed. "I don't need anything expensive." "Nonsense, it's your birthday. We'll all be there. Your father, Darius, Vanessa, the whole family. We're celebrating properly this year." I agreed, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to know what she was planning. People like my mother always revealed themselves if you gave them enough room. The restaurant she ultimately reserved wasn't simply expensive, it was exclusive. Reservations often required months of notice. Politicians ate there, professional athletes, corporate executives, people who enjoyed being seen. When I arrived that evening, the hostess greeted me warmly. "Happy birthday, Ms. Brooks," she smiled. "Your party has already arrived." I thanked her and followed behind. My family was seated near the center of the dining room, beneath an enormous crystal chandelier. The best table in the restaurant, naturally. Appearances mattered. Denise stood first. "There she is," she kissed my cheek. "Happy birthday." Her perfume was the same one she'd worn for years. Elegant, expensive, overwhelming. Harold offered an awkward smile. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Darius barely looked up from his phone. Vanessa gave me an air kiss that never came close to my face. "You look nice," she said. The compliment sounded rehearsed. I took my seat. Within minutes, champagne arrived. Not for me, for everyone else. "I'll just have sparkling water," I told the waiter. Vanessa laughed softly. "No birthday champagne? I have an early meeting tomorrow." "Oh," she exchanged a glance with Darius. "I forgot, you still have those office hours." The first shot, subtle, predictable. Menace arrived. Nobody looked at the prices, not even once. Vanessa ordered imported caviar, Japanese A5 Wagyu, and a bottle of vintage Bordeaux. Then another. She never even asked whether anyone else wanted wine. She simply assumed someone else would pay. I'd seen this movie before. About 20 minutes into dinner, Vanessa finally turned toward me. "So, how's work?" "Busy." She smiled. "Doing what exactly?" "I still work in commercial real estate." "Oh right, the office," she nodded sympathetically. "I honestly don't know how people survive on salaries anymore." She took a sip of wine before continuing. "Especially in Atlanta. Everything is so expensive. I guess that's why so many people are stuck renting." Denise smiled proudly. "Naomi has always been practical. She's never cared much about luxury." Interesting. They weren't fishing for information. They were confirming assumptions. I simply nodded. "I like keeping life simple." Vanessa laughed. "Simple is one word for it. I mean," she glanced around the restaurant. "This place isn't exactly designed for office employees." She folded her napkin. "I hope you didn't insist on coming here because it's your birthday. The appetizers cost more than some people earn in a week." Darius chuckled. "If things get tight, I've got you." He leaned back confidently. "I don't mind covering dinner." It took effort not to smile. The man hadn't successfully paid his own rent in months. Yet here he was pretending to rescue me financially. Denise looked at him with unmistakable pride. "That's what a real man does. He protects his family." Then she turned toward me. "You should appreciate having a brother like Darius. Not everyone gets that." I stared at my water glass. Funny, because every major financial disaster I'd survived had started with Darius. Harold quietly cut into his steak. He never interrupted, never challenged Denise, never defended me. Silence had become his favorite survival strategy decades earlier. The waiter returned with another bottle of wine. Vanessa barely waited for him to finish pouring before speaking again. "So, you're still living downtown?" "I am." "That little penthouse apartment?" "Yes." She smiled. "I've always wondered something. Isn't the rent outrageous?" "Not really." "Really? I assumed it had to be, I mean." She looked around dramatically. "You've never exactly seemed," she paused, "wealthy." There it was, the insult hidden inside fake curiosity. "I manage." "I've always admired that," Vanessa continued. "I could never live with that kind of financial pressure. I'd rather own something." Darius laughed. "Maybe one day." Denise joined him. "Exactly. Once you finally settle down and get married." Her eyes narrowed. You're 32 now. You should start thinking about your future. I am. No, I mean a real future. A husband, children, a proper family. She looked toward Darius. Not spending every night working. I smiled politely. My life works for me. It shouldn't, she answered immediately. No woman wants to grow old alone. Vanessa nodded dramatically. Especially successful women. They scare men. You have to soften yourself. I let her continue. You've become so independent that people probably think you don't need anyone. She sighed. That's lonely. Maybe, but not nearly as lonely as constantly begging other people to rescue you from your own decisions. The conversation drifted toward Darius, exactly as it always did. He launched into another grand business idea this time, luxury short-term rentals. It's going to explode, he announced confidently. I've already mapped everything out. Investors are interested. Harold nodded. Denise beamed. Vanessa squeezed his hand. No one asked the obvious question, if everything was going so well. Why had he been evicted 6 days earlier? Because in our family, reality was optional, belief was mandatory. About halfway through the main course, Denise casually checked her watch, a tiny movement, barely noticeable. Then she leaned toward Harold and whispered something. He nodded almost immediately. A second later, his foot tapped Darius beneath the table, not hard, just enough, a signal. Darius looked at his phone. Perfect timing. Oh. He frowned. I've got to take this. Potential investor. Won't be long, he stood. Vanessa smiled proudly. Go close the deal. He kissed her forehead, then disappeared toward the restaurant entrance. I watched him leave without saying a word. My mother picked up her wine, completely relaxed, as though nothing unusual had happened. Exactly then, I realized this dinner had never been about celebrating my birthday. It had been designed to keep me sitting in that chair, long enough for my brother to steal what they believed was my home. Set you up. Darius had been gone less than 2 minutes. No one mentioned it. No one asked where he was. No one seemed the least bit concerned that the guest of honor's brother had suddenly disappeared during dinner, because everyone at the table already knew exactly where he was going. Everyone, except the person they thought they were fooling. Vanessa picked up her wine glass and smiled at me. You know, Naomi, I've always admired how adaptable you've been. Have I? Of course, you never complain. You never ask anyone for anything. You just survive. Denise nodded approvingly. That's because we raised you to be resilient. I almost laughed. No, they hadn't raised me to be resilient. They had raised me to expect abandonment. There was a difference. The waiter arrived with another course, imported truffle pasta. No one thanked him. Denise barely looked up before speaking again. So, what are your plans after dinner? I'll probably head home. For the last time. The words slipped from her mouth before she could stop them. A tiny mistake. Almost invisible. Harold looked sharply at her. Vanessa quickly took another sip of wine to hide the panic flashing across her face. My mother recovered almost instantly. I mean, you should finally start looking for something bigger. You're 32. That apartment isn't exactly suitable if you ever get married. I've managed so far, she smiled sweetly. But life changes. Yes, it certainly did. Across the table, Harold finally cleared his throat. Naomi, I've been thinking. About what? Your future. I waited. He folded his napkin carefully before speaking. Sometimes, family has to make sacrifices. There it was, the setup. I simply nodded. I agree. He looked relieved. You do? Absolutely. If one family member is struggling, everyone should help. Vanessa practically beamed. Denise looked victorious. They thought I was walking exactly where they wanted me. Harold continued. You know, Darius has had a difficult year. I've noticed. The market hurt everyone. No, I corrected gently. Bad decisions hurt Darius. The table fell silent. Denise's smile disappeared. That's unfair. Is it? He works hard. I've never questioned that. I've questioned whether he finishes anything. Vanessa immediately leaned forward. That's incredibly judgmental. I wasn't judging. I was observing. She folded her arms. Easy to say when you've never had a family depending on you. Interesting. I'd spent years supporting myself. Meanwhile, the two people lecturing me had quietly drained every credit line available, trying to keep Darius afloat. Denise changed the subject before the conversation slipped further. Speaking of family, she smiled warmly. I've been thinking about your apartment. Here we go. It's a nice place. It is. A little small for one person. I've never minded, but Darius and Vanessa could really use something like that. Vanessa lowered her eyes, pretending to be embarrassed. Oh, Denise. You don't have to bring that up. My mother ignored her. They've had such terrible luck. They deserve a fresh start. I looked directly at my brother's empty chair. Do they? Of course they do. What happened wasn't their fault. I tilted my head. The eviction? Harold answered before Denise could. The landlord raised the rent. I thought they stopped paying. Silence. Vanessa looked away. Interesting, they hadn't expected me to know that. It wasn't that simple, Denise snapped. It rarely is. No, I agreed. It usually isn't. The waiter refilled everyone's glasses. Mine remained untouched. I had no intention of clouding my judgment tonight. Denise reached across the table. Her fingertips rested lightly on my wrist. A gesture that would have looked loving to anyone watching. It wasn't. It was control. Sweetheart, you've always been so responsible. I try. And that's why we know you'll do the right thing. What does that look like? She smiled. Helping your brother. How? We'll discuss that when Darius gets back. So that was the plan. First, take my apartment. Then, present whatever financial trap they'd prepared. Layer after layer. Greed rarely traveled alone. My phone vibrated once inside my purse. No one noticed. I glanced down naturally. One message. Evelyn. He's here. Evelyn Carter, General Manager of Residential Operations. One of the very few people who knew exactly what was happening tonight. I typed only 3 words beneath the table. Proceed as planned. Message delivered. Phone away. Conversation resumed. Vanessa suddenly smiled. I've always wondered, why don't you ever bring anyone around? What do you mean? A boyfriend, a fiancé, a husband? There isn't one. She laughed softly. I figured. Denise sighed dramatically. She's too focused on work. No man wants to compete with a career. I've never asked anyone to. Exactly, Vanessa answered. That's the problem. They wanted a reaction, embarrassment, anger, anything. Instead, I smiled. My life is surprisingly peaceful. Is it? Denise asked. Very. She shook her head. I worry about you. I appreciate that. No, I really do. You've isolated yourself. You don't lean on family. I learned not to. The sentence landed harder than I'd intended. Harold looked down at his plate. For a brief moment, something resembling guilt crossed his face. Then it disappeared. Denise refused to acknowledge it. You always exaggerate. Do I? We've done everything for you. I almost asked whether identity theft counted as doing something for me. Instead, I stayed quiet. Not yet. The waiter cleared the dinner plates. Dessert menus appeared. Vanessa ordered without looking. Chocolate soufflé, imported vanilla ice cream, another bottle of dessert wine. She still expected someone else to cover everything. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Still no Darius. Denise checked her watch again. Not worried, expectant. Finally, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen for less than a second before locking it again. A tiny smile crossed her lips. Mission accomplished, or so she believed. She leaned comfortably into her chair. Everything's taken care of. She didn't realize she'd spoken out loud. Harold looked at her. What? Oh, nothing. I was thinking about tomorrow. No, she wasn't. She thought Darius had already changed the locks. She believed my clothes were probably sitting in a hallway by now. She imagined me finishing dessert, driving home, and discovering I had nowhere left to go. She wanted to watch that moment happen. In public. On my birthday. She had no idea. Her son wasn't standing inside my penthouse. He was standing in front of a door protected by people who didn't negotiate with entitled families. And every passing minute was making his situation dramatically worse. But the first scream came from the front entrance, not loud, not dramatic, just sharp enough to slice through the quiet conversations filling the restaurant. Every head turned, including ours. Darius stumbled through the revolving doors, looking like a man who had just outrun a disaster. His blazer was gone. His white dress shirt clung to his back with sweat. His tie hung loose around his neck. One sleeve had been ripped nearly to the elbow. His breathing was so uneven that he had to brace himself against the hostess stand before taking another step. For a second, no one recognized him. Then Vanessa shot to her feet. Darius, she hurried toward him. What happened? He didn't answer. His eyes searched the dining room frantically until they landed on our table, more specifically, on our mother. He walked toward us with stiff, uncertain steps. Every person in the restaurant watched him. The room had gone almost completely silent. Even the piano player stopped. Denise stood. What happened? No answer. Harold frowned. Son? Darius swallowed hard. His lips trembled. He looked around nervously before lowering his voice. We need to leave. Denise blinked. What are you talking about? We need to leave now. Vanessa grabbed his arm. You're scaring me. What happened? He looked at her, then back at Denise. I went to Naomi's building. My mother nodded impatiently. And? I couldn't get inside. Denise frowned. What do you mean? The lobby was full of security. So? I told them I was family. And? They asked for identification. Harold looked confused. That's normal? Darius shook his head. No, it wasn't normal. There were armed officers. The table froze. What officers? I don't know. They weren't city police. They weren't private security. They were federal. Denise laughed nervously. Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious. I tried explaining that I needed access to my sister's apartment. What did they say? They asked whether I had written authorization. No. So I told them I had a key. He stopped talking. Harold leaned forward. Then what? I used it. Vanessa covered her mouth. You actually tried? I thought it would work. It didn't. What happened? The lock recognized the failed access attempt. Everyone stared at him. Then alarms started, loud ones. The elevators locked. The lobby doors sealed. Denise's face slowly lost color. What? They surrounded me. Who? The officers. How many? I don't know. 6, maybe 8. They came out of everywhere. They ordered me onto the floor. Vanessa whispered, Oh my God. I tried explaining. I told them my mother owned the apartment. No one spoke. I told them there had to be some mistake. He laughed once, a broken sound. They asked me another question. What? Who told you that? His eyes moved slowly toward Denise. I said, my mother. The silence became unbearable. Denise finally forced a smile. So they told me. His breathing became shallow again. That no member of the Brooks family had ever owned that residence. Harold looked at me, then back at Darius. What are you talking about? I don't know, Darius snapped. I kept telling them Naomi rented the penthouse. They kept saying. He couldn't finish. Saying what? Vanessa whispered. They kept calling her. He swallowed. The principal owner. No one moved. No one breathed. Denise actually laughed. A short, nervous laugh. That's impossible. I know what I heard. They said she represents the ownership group. They asked why I was attempting unauthorized entry into private property. Harold slowly turned toward me. Naomi. I calmly folded my napkin. Yes? What is he talking about? I met his eyes. The building. What building? The one you believe I rent. Harold frowned. You rent it. No, I don't. Denise shook her head immediately. Stop playing games. I'm not. You've rented that apartment for years. I lived there. That's different. Vanessa stared at me. What does that mean? It means I stopped being a tenant quite a while ago. Darius looked completely lost. What are you saying? I own it. Denise laughed again. No, you don't. I do. The apartment. The entire building. Silence. Complete silence. Even the servers nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Harold blinked twice. The building? Yes. The whole property. Denise folded her arms. Enough. This isn't funny. I agree, it isn't. You expect us to believe, she almost smiled, that you secretly bought a luxury high-rise. No, I expect you to believe facts. Vanessa looked at Darius. Tell her to stop. He didn't answer, because he suddenly remembered something. The officers, he whispered. They never said apartment owner. They kept saying, he looked directly at me. Property owner. I nodded once. They were being accurate. Denise slammed both hands onto the table. That's impossible. You work in an office. I do. You have a salary. I receive one. So where would that kind of money come from? Investments. She laughed harder. What investments? The ones you never asked about. Harold looked physically ill. You own? He couldn't finish. Everything, I answered quietly. The residential units, the retail spaces, the parking structure, the commercial leases, the entire property. Vanessa slowly sat back down. She looked around helplessly. I don't understand. You weren't supposed to, I answered gently. I've spent years making sure very few people did. Darius buried both hands in his hair. I tried breaking into my own building. I corrected softly. Yes. And the officers. They were protecting residents, as they're trained to do. He stared at the floor. I know what you thought. Denise refused to surrender. If that's true, why didn't you tell us? I smiled. You never asked. No, you hid it. I kept my business private. There's a difference. Harold whispered, My God. For the first time that evening, no one at the table looked at me with pity. They looked at me with something they'd never imagined feeling. They looked completely outmatched. Nobody reached for their food. Nobody touched their wine. The birthday dinner had quietly become something else, an autopsy. Every assumption my family had carried into that restaurant was dying in front of them. Denise was the first to recover. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and reached for the only weapon she'd relied on her entire life: control. If what you're saying is true, she folded her hands together, then why are you living like this? I looked at her. Like what? Like an ordinary employee. You drive a modest car. You don't wear designer labels. You don't travel with security. You never brag. She laughed once. People with real money don't hide it. I couldn't help smiling. Actually, they usually do. Her expression tightened. No, they don't. You've been watching influencers. I've been working with investors. Different worlds. Harold remained silent. His eyes stayed fixed on me as though he were trying to reconcile two completely different versions of his daughter. I don't understand, he finally whispered. How long? About 8 years. You've been... He searched for the right words. Building all of this? Yes. And you never told us? I tried. The entire table looked at me. I remember calling after our first major acquisition. I told Mom I'd become a partner. Denise frowned. I don't remember that. I know. You interrupted me. You asked whether I'd finally met a husband. No one spoke. I remember telling everyone at Thanksgiving that I'd purchased commercial property. Denise looked away. You said, That's nice, sweetheart. Can you pass the mashed potatoes? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. I remember explaining that I had investors flying in from New York. I smiled faintly. Darius asked whether they wanted to invest in his app. Harold slowly closed his eyes. Memory after memory, conversation after conversation, not ignored because they were secret, but ignored because they weren't about Darius. I never hid my career, I said quietly. You simply decided it wasn't interesting. Denise opened her mouth, then closed it again. For perhaps the first time in her life, she couldn't rewrite history fast enough. The waiter approached cautiously. Would anyone like dessert? 5 pairs of eyes turned toward him. The poor man immediately realized he'd interrupted something far more serious than dinner. He hesitated. I can come back. No, I smiled. I'd still like birthday cake. He nodded gratefully before disappearing again. The tiny interruption gave everyone a moment to breathe. Not that it helped. Vanessa finally broke the silence. So, if you own the building, what were the officers protecting? Our newest residents. She frowned. I don't understand. The penthouse is no longer occupied by me. Darius looked up instantly. What? I moved 6 months ago. His face drained of color again. You don't even live there? No. Then why did everyone think? Because the ownership records weren't changing. I kept the residence furnished. It was useful during renovations. Denise looked confused. So who lives there now? I answered calmly. A federal appellate judge. Silence. Again. The security detail rotates. Some days there are 4 officers, some days 12. It depends on current threat assessments. Darius stared at me in horror. I tried forcing my way into the home of a federally protected official. Yes. He covered his face with both hands. Oh God, I didn't know. I know. I know what you thought. Vanessa looked ready to cry. Are they going to arrest him? I answered honestly, I don't know. Harold's chair scraped softly against the floor. He leaned forward. Naomi, I'm asking you as your father, can you fix this? There it was, not concern, not apology, a request. The first one, after decades of assuming they were entitled to everything I had. I thought carefully before answering. What exactly would you like me to fix? Darius made a mistake. He committed one. Please, talk to someone, explain. They'll listen to you, I know they will. Denise immediately joined him. Exactly, you own the building. You can make this disappear. I looked at her for several seconds. You really believe that's how the world works? She frowned. Isn't it? No, I don't interfere with security investigations. You could. I won't. Her eyes narrowed. So you're choosing strangers over your own family? No, I'm choosing accountability. Darius finally spoke, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean... I know, you intended to steal my home. You just targeted the wrong one. He flinched. It wasn't stealing. No? I had Mom's permission. I slowly turned toward Denise. There it is. The sentence hung in the air. My mother immediately defended herself. I was trying to help your brother by giving him property that wasn't yours. It was family. No, it was mine. We're family. Exactly, so why couldn't you ask? She didn't answer, because asking would have allowed me to say no. Stealing removed that possibility. My birthday cake finally arrived. A single elegant chocolate cake with one candle. The waiter placed it gently in front of me. Happy birthday, Ms. Brooks, he smiled. I hope the rest of your evening improves. So do I. The candle flickered quietly between us. No one sang, no one clapped, no one even looked at the cake. Their attention remained fixed on me. For years, I'd imagined this moment. Not revenge, recognition, just once. I wanted them to see me as I truly was. Not the quiet daughter, not the backup plan, not the family wallet. Simply, me. Ironically. The truth hurt them far more than any lie ever could. Before I blew out the candle, my phone rang. The screen displayed one name, Evelyn Carter. I answered. Good evening. Her voice remained professional. Sorry to interrupt your dinner. No problem. I wanted to inform you that the responding officers have completed their incident report. I appreciate the update. They also requested confirmation that Mr. Brooks has no ownership interest in the property. He doesn't. I've already sent written verification. Perfect, she paused. One more thing. The judge's office asked me to thank you. For what? They appreciated how quickly building management responded. I smiled. I'm glad everyone is safe. So are we, she ended the call. No one at the table had missed a single word, especially the phrase building management, because until that moment, some small part of Denise still believed I might be exaggerating. That phone call destroyed the last excuse she had left. The empire she'd dismissed for years was real, and she had just ordered her favorite son to commit a crime against it. No one spoke after the call ended. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was irreversible. For the first time in my life, my family had run out of explanations. Denise stared at the tablecloth as though the embroidered pattern might somehow provide an escape. Harold looked 10 years older than he had 2 hours earlier. Vanessa kept glancing toward Darius, waiting for him to say something that could magically repair everything. He never did, because there wasn't anything left to say. The waiter quietly returned with the check and placed the leather folder in the center of the table. Out of habit, everyone looked at me. That almost made me laugh. For years they had mocked my ordinary office job. Now, without a single conversation, they assumed I would pay. Denise noticed the movement too. She straightened in her chair. Well, I suppose the birthday girl should enjoy one last gift. I looked at her. What gift? She forced a smile. Dinner. I glanced at the unopened check. I thought Darius said he was covering it. No one moved. Vanessa looked down. Harold rubbed his forehead. Darius didn't even reach toward the folder. He swallowed. I don't have my wallet. Another silence. Then I remembered. They took it. He nodded slowly. When security detained me, they returned everything except my access key. Evidence, I said quietly. He closed his eyes. Yeah. Denise cleared her throat. Naomi, it's just dinner. Would you mind? I interrupted gently. Of course. I picked up the folder, opened it, and signed the receipt without looking at the total. The amount didn't matter. It never had. What mattered was what happened next. I removed a business card from my purse and placed it beside Denise's plate. She frowned. What's this? My attorney's contact information. Her face tightened. Why would I need your attorney? In case you're contacted. Contacted by whom? The building's legal department. Harold looked alarmed. Naomi. They'll probably want written statements regarding the attempted unlawful entry. Denise's eyes widened. You wouldn't sue your own brother. I haven't sued anyone. I simply won't interfere. But you own the company. Exactly, and because I do, I have fiduciary responsibilities. Harold frowned. What does that mean? It means I have legal obligations to every investor who trusted me. If I ignore criminal activity because it involves family, I expose the company and myself. I won't do that. Denise shook her head. So business comes before blood? No, integrity comes before manipulation. She opened her mouth again. I raised one hand. Please don't. I've listened for 32 years. It's my turn now. No one interrupted. I've spent most of my life trying to earn something that should never have required earning: respect. I believed if I worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, if I stayed patient long enough, you would eventually see me. I looked at each of them. You never did. You only saw what I could give you. Another long silence. Then something unexpected happened. Harold spoke. Not as Denise's husband, not as Darius's father, just as a man. I'm sorry, the words came out almost as a whisper. I should have protected you. I should have said something years ago. I didn't. He lowered his head. And that's on me. I believed him. Not because it erased the past, but because it was the first honest sentence I'd ever heard him say about our family. Denise looked at him in disbelief. Harold. No? He didn't even look at her. She's right. We ignored her. We used her. We made excuses. You made excuses, Denise snapped. I supported our son. You sacrificed our daughter, he answered quietly. Those 7 words landed harder than anything else that had been said all night. Vanessa slowly reached for Darius's hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold hers either. He was staring at me. I really thought... He stopped. I know. I thought you needed us. I smiled sadly. That was the mistake. I stopped needing your approval a long time ago. I just never stopped hoping I'd have it. No one cried. Real regret doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes, it just looks empty. I stood and picked up my purse. Happy birthday to me. No one smiled. As I turned to leave, Denise finally spoke. Naomi. I paused without turning around. I'm sorry, the words sounded unfamiliar coming from her, not because they were insincere, but because she'd almost never used them. I waited. She continued. I thought... She struggled to finish. I thought you would always stay. I finally looked back. I did stay. For years. You just never noticed. Then I walked away. Outside, the Atlanta night felt strangely peaceful. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Evelyn. Everything resolved. Residents are safe. I smiled. Thank you. Great work tonight. A black SUV pulled to the curb. My driver stepped out and opened the rear door. As we pulled away from the restaurant, I looked back once, through the tall glass windows. I could still see my family sitting at the same table. No one had moved. No one was eating. No one seemed to know what came next. For me, the answer was simple. I went home. Not to the downtown penthouse. That chapter had already closed. 6 months earlier, I'd quietly moved into a restored historic estate, overlooking the Chattahoochee River. Private, peaceful, surrounded by trees instead of traffic. Nobody in my family knew the address. Nobody ever would. 3 weeks later, I received a formal update from corporate counsel. After reviewing surveillance footage and interviewing every witness, the authorities declined to pursue criminal charges against Darius. His actions had been classified as a misunderstanding rather than malicious intent. He was fortunate, very fortunate. The building, however, permanently revoked his access privileges. A civil trespass notice was entered into the property's security system. If he ever attempted to enter again, every officer on duty would immediately be notified. I never appealed the decision. I never requested harsher consequences. I simply allowed the system to work exactly as it was designed. Over the following months, things changed. Harold called occasionally. Not to ask for money, just to talk. Sometimes we'd spend 20 minutes discussing books. Sometimes real estate. Sometimes nothing important at all. We were learning how to become father and daughter for the first time. Denise wrote several letters, handwritten, no requests, no excuses, only apologies. I read every one of them. I answered only the last. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't forgetting. It's deciding that someone no longer controls your future. As for Darius, he eventually found steady work managing operations for a regional logistics company. No flashy startups, no impossible promises, just honest work. Ironically, it suited him far better than pretending to be an entrepreneur. We still see each other on holidays. Our conversations are polite, respectful, careful. Some bridges aren't rebuilt. They're replaced with stronger ones that carry less weight. People often ask whether success is the best revenge. I don't think it is. Success doesn't erase betrayal. It doesn't rewrite childhood. It doesn't heal every scar. What success gives you is freedom. Freedom to stop begging people to recognize your worth. Freedom to walk away from anyone who only loves the version of you they can control. And freedom to understand one simple truth. The greatest victory isn't proving your value to the people who underestimated you. It's building a life so complete that their opinion no longer determines your peace. That birthday dinner was supposed to leave me homeless. Instead, it became the night my family finally realized they had spent years looking down on the wealthiest person at the table, and the daughter they believed they could replace had quietly built a life that no one could ever take from her again.